From the New York Times, it's The Headlines. I'm Tracy Mumford. Today's Monday, June 2nd. Here's what we're covering.
When this call came out today, our officers rushed as quickly as they could, and they immediately ran into a chaotic situation where a man was throwing Molotov cocktails and using...
In Boulder, Colorado yesterday, a group of demonstrators who regularly gather on Sundays to march in support of Israeli hostages was attacked.
Witnesses are reporting that the subject threw an incendiary device into the crowd. The suspect was heard to yell, "Free Palestine," during the attack.
In all, 8 people were injured, 2 of whom were airlifted to a burn unit. Boulder's mayor described the group as Jewish community members who were on a march for peace and for hostage return. The FBI said a 45-year-old man identified as Mohammed Sabri Salman was arrested at the scene.
As a result of these preliminary facts, it is clear that this is a targeted act of violence, and the FBI is investigating this as an act of terrorism.
The attack has intensified fears about the backlash to Israel's military campaign in Gaza, coming less than 2 weeks after 2 Israeli embassy aides were shot and killed in Washington, D.C. In Gaza yesterday, according to local health officials, more than 20 people were shot and killed, and almost 200 were wounded as they waited at an aid distribution center. The crowd had gathered overnight to try and beat the rush to get food. The Israeli military initially said it was unaware of any injuries from Israeli fire at the location, but a military official later told reporters that troops had fired what were described as warning shots toward, quote, suspects. The incident is the latest involving the new aid distribution system in Gaza. Until recently, Israel had blocked all aid into the territory. Now, civilians are being directed to a handful of tightly controlled sites. The rollout began last week. While some days have gone smoothly, there have also been chaotic scenes, including one other instance in which Israeli forces said they fired warning shots. Over the weekend, Ukraine launched a stunning attack on Russian air bases, stretching all the way from near Norway in the west to Siberia in the east. The full scope of the damage is still becoming clear.
What we do know, even with this limited information, is that this was one of the most audacious attacks of the Ukrainians to date.
My colleague Mark Santora says the attack was so unexpected, some military analysts have likened it to the surprise of Pearl Harbor. The Ukrainians had been trying to find a way to hit Russia's airfields, to cut off their ability to continue launching relentless bombing campaigns on Ukrainian towns and cities. They'd tried in the past with long-range weapons, but the Russians had adapted.
So what the Ukrainians did this time was basically drive right up to the bases by secreting these drones in the backs of trailers and then releasing them remotely so that the Russian defenses were essentially useless. While the New York Times hasn't been able to confirm the full extent of the damage, Ukrainian intelligence services and President Zelensky said that 41 Russian bombers, some 34% of the fleet, were damaged or destroyed, which is worth an estimated $7 billion, carried out by little drones that cost, a few $1,000s each.
Russia also launched a major attack this weekend, sending around 500 drones and decoys into Ukraine. Delegations from the 2 countries are scheduled to meet later today in Istanbul for peace talks, but expectations of a breakthrough are low. American auto executives are warning that the U.S. trade war with China could force them to cut back production in the coming days and weeks because they're running out of magnets. The magnets are made from rare earth metals, a resource China has a near total lock on. The country stopped exporting the metals last month. Though China and the U.S. have reached something of a trade truce for the moment, China's continued to limit access to the materials, which are critical not only to cars, they're used in motors, brakes, and steering, but also to everything from semiconductors to fighter jets. One economic analyst called America's dependence on rare earth magnets an Achilles heel. Some American factories hope to start producing rare earth magnets this year, but China has a significant head start on mining, production, and research. Dozens of universities there offer rare earth chemistry programs, which have found more efficient ways to process the metals. The U.S. has 0 similar programs. And finally,
helping you every day. That's why Canada shops our day.
In Canada, the country's last old-school department store chain is closing. Granted, chain stores taking a hit these days is not uncommon. R.I.P. Kmart and almost every Sears. But the Hudson's Bay Company is the oldest corporation on the continent, founded 355 years ago, long before Canada or the U.S. were even countries. It was not a department store then, of course. Britain set it up as a fur trading company. The full name? The Governor and Company of Adventurers of England, trading into Hudson's Bay. It was given a vast stretch of territory, about a third of what's now Canada. There was no consideration of the indigenous people who already lived there. Hudson's Bay Company established remote trading posts and relied on indigenous trappers for beaver pelts and other resources. Over the centuries, it evolved from a major force in colonizing North America to its final form, a sprawling department store chain with perfume counters and a small army of mannequins, which are also now for sale as the stores close. The company filed for bankruptcy in March. One shopper raiding one of the final clearance sales in downtown Ottawa told The Times she had a love-hate relationship with the store. For her, it was a mix of nostalgia, but with the dark side of Canada's colonial history. Those are the headlines. Today on The Daily, Times investigative reporters walk through what they uncovered about Elon Musk's chaotic life on the campaign trail. That's next in the New York Times audio app, or you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Tracy Mumford. We'll be back tomorrow.